Welcome back. This is the second segment of the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Jerry Spinks, the President of the Historical Society. With me today is somebody that is really very qualified to pick up on the phrase that Ed Booth so aptly used in describing all these structures, returning to use. Mike Langton has a unique perspective. He's a former member of the Florida legislature, a developer who has restored and returned to use these buildings, and as the owner of one of Jacksonville's very oldest residents, he has, with hammer and policy, hammer and gavel you might speak, worked on all these issues. Mike, it's a pleasure having you here today, and thank you for being here.
Jerry, it's a delight to be with you.
Well, you heard the list. If you and I were talking to a developer, what are some of the issues that would permit someone to return some of these structures to use?
Well, a developer is faced with the economics of a project, and that's the biggest challenge. Historic buildings present a much bigger challenge in terms of making numbers work, simply, mathematics work, that they can financially be feasible than in any other building. I mean, it's much easier, much simpler to do a new construction than it is a historic, especially an adaptive reuse of an old building, which is what we need to do with these buildings. Most of these buildings can't be used for the original use. Most of the downtown structures that were mentioned, they have excellent opportunity for residential, conversion to residential. They were built as office buildings and can be converted to residential with some ground floor retail. But those challenges are great because you have surprises, we like to say in the business, that you always uncover,
right,
that blow the budget out of the water. And when you just, the cost of historically restoring something with the kind of sensitive detail and sensitive effort that you need to make is much greater than new construction, and therefore makes the numbers work making the numbers work is more difficult. So what I've found is that without a public-private partnership, it really is almost impossible to do these projects. It has to be an involvement of your local government or some other funding source. For instance, the use of federal historic tax credit, which is a partnership with the federal government, can be very helpful. In fact, I've used that in my building.
What percentage is that now?
Well, it's 20% of the construction, or the reconstruction cost, not the acquisition cost.
So every dollar of restoration is
right. You can
in
get
the formula.
A tax credit. Now, most people can't use a large tax credit, say $1 million or more tax credit for their own taxes, so they can sell it, and there is a market to sell those things at a little less than
So it's a funding source.
But it's a funding stream, yeah. It helps put together the economics of the project. Grants from the city or low-interest loans from your local government, they're pivotal. They're absolutely critical. Without those, hardly any of these projects can be done. The one project I did, the W.A. Knight building downtown, I was able to secure 2 different low-interest loans from the city. The conversion of the American Heritage Life building, which has been very successful, adaptive reuse from business office to residential, was supported by close to $20+ million from the city in grants and loans. The Carling Hotel, the old Roosevelt Hotel, right, most of people know it as. It's now called the Carling. Another project I think had $16 million of city grants and loans in it. But that's the kind of dedication it takes. If the city understands the value of saving their history, their heritage, in terms of their structures, especially in the downtown core, if they understand and appreciate that, and the public understands and appreciates that, then it makes sense. It makes sense to put more money in to save a beautiful old building.
How could you qualify or describe the returns, so to speak, to the public for doing that and to the city for fostering it?
Well, obviously the aesthetics benefits. I mean, everybody loves historic buildings. Everybody loves historic downtowns.
It gives it character.
It
something
gives it wonderful character, that the human scale, the warmth of it all. It gives you a feeling of reaching back into history and being part of it. It's funny that you see new urban development that's modeled after to make look like old downtowns.
Right.
For instance, the St. John's Town Center. The most successful part of that is the part that looks like they try to make it look like an old downtown. Well, we have the real thing. We have the real thing. But we have to invest more of public and private dollars to make it work in a viable way. Because a commercial project by a developer has to, my money's at risk, and my talents and energies, and my investors' money's at risk. So there has to be that give and take, that relationship.
Does a city recover earn anything on their investment,
Oh,
so to
absolutely.
speak?
I mean, you go from an abandoned building in the middle of downtown, like the Barnett Bank building. That's a perfect site. It's on an incredibly important corner. It's on a corner that's so important, the Adams and Laura, that the city's ready to spend $4 million, I think it is, doing the streetscapes from Hemming Plaza down to the Landing. They're getting ready to do it. It'll be under construction in a few months. But then they're going to have 3 empty buildings: the Barnett Bank, the Bisbee building, and the Florida the Marble Bank building. They're all going to be vacant and empty. So it makes so much sense to stimulate through private developers. It should be done by private developers, but stimulate and partner with partnerships from the local government, because they go from empty buildings that have almost no value on the tax base to huge value on the tax base, to huge assessments, and also you have the vitality. I mean, the Barnett Bank can have. I had it under contract for a couple of years. We had it designed for 110 residential units. I mean, think of 110 families in the Barnett Bank at the corner of Adams and Laura. What that would do for the economy of downtown and the city in general, it'd be huge. So the saving of these historic buildings is no longer, in my opinion, just a feel-good thing to do if you're a historian. It's the right thing to do from an economic standpoint for the vitality of a community. I mean, you either have to restore them or tear them down and put something new up, because you just can't have those blank old buildings sitting there in dilapidated state. It just brings down the whole feeling of your downtown. It brings down people's attitudes about their downtown. It attracts people that you might not want in your downtown, instead of the vitality of the economic heartbeat of a community. And that's where we're sort of missing the boat here in Jacksonville. We're just not investing enough of our limited resources. And the mayor's office in the city has limited resources. But I just don't think it's a priority. And I just don't think they're putting enough of priority in historic buildings.
They're, in a way, they're assets on our civic balance sheet.
Absolutely.
To be invested.
Absolutely.
For community purposes.
Right.
What are some of the success stories that you've seen since you've been around?
There's a number of them. I mentioned 2 of them. The old American Heritage Life building, which is now 11 East. The old Roosevelt Hotel, which is now the Carling. My building, the WA Knight, which is a small building, but we converted it. A dilapidated building, had been closed and abandoned, other than Bill's shoe store on the ground level, for 40 years. I mean, there was barrels of chemicals in the hallway, and there was a big hole in the roof in the 3rd floor, so they had cordoned off the 2nd floor where the 3rd floor had fallen into the 2nd floor, and they just paneled it off, and it sat that way for 40 years. Now it's a viable building with Chew Restaurant, which is one of the best restaurants in all of Jacksonville, on the ground floor. I still have an empty space if anybody needs a space. I have a beautiful space on Adams Street in a beautiful 1920 brick
How about
building.
the apartments?
And apartments upstairs, there are 6 beautiful apartments on the 3rd floor, and 6 beautiful apartments on the 2nd floor. There's a view of the
Here, let me
hallway.
hold that.
That's the stairwell that we restored. Look at that gorgeous mahogany stairwell we restored, and that's the typical hallway, and that's an apartment. They're just absolutely lovely spaces. Look at the wood beam across the top. Those are almost 10-foot ceilings. It's the original heart of pine floor. The windows, I restored the exact windows. We didn't replace them. They're all the beautiful wood windows from the 1920s. It's just got great character, great bones.
Mike, hand me the photo of the outside of the building so people can...
The current one?
Yes,
current
please.
view? This is the current view. We returned the canopy to the front of the building over the residential entrance. It's kind of hard to see. There's a tree in front of it. It's on the right-hand side of the building. On the left-hand side, far left-hand side, is where Chew's Restaurant is. And those are the apartment windows. And there's 2 retail spaces on the ground floor. That's an 18,000 square foot building that is now a viable piece of our downtown again, where it had sat, as I said, vacant and abandoned for 40 years.
Well, without asking you for numbers, I would assume that the tax value of this is considerably higher than it was when it had a hole in the roof.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, right. But with today's economics, it's a struggle, but it's a worthy struggle.
Well, do buildings like the old Ambassador Hotel have a future?
I think so. There's very few buildings in downtown that are abandoned right now that I think that aren't salvageable. Very few. And I'd like to see the Ambassador Hotel done. I'd like to see the old Jones Furniture Store done. I mean, all these buildings have value.
Economic value, civic value.
They have more civic value, and they can be made to be economically feasible, as I said, but it requires that public-private partnership. I know you hear a lot of that. It sounds like a buzzword, but it is critically, it is the ultimate element of historic restoration, or adaptive reuse, historic adaptive reuse in our city, and I suspect in any city. It's got to be, both sides want it,
Wow.
because one won't happen without the other.
Well, City Hall is another building.
Oh, and the City Hall in St. James is probably one of the most beautiful restorations. And it was mentioned earlier, the Florida Theater. What a great job that was. That was close to the Wrecking Ball. So was the City Hall.
And now this new City Hall annex was what? The Y?
Exactly. Another new one. I mean, another great example. But think of, and the Ed Ball building just recently restored.
Right.
Now think about it. The City Hall, $26 million of public money. But it's a beautiful structure. Would anybody want that torn down? Saving the train station. How many millions of dollars went into that to make it a convention center? But they're
both
there.
Are highly useful.
They're highly useful. They have a great public function, and they add to the vitality and the viability of our downtown. But again, it accentuates my point. These buildings cannot be done. The YMCA building could have not been done by the Police and Fire Pension Fund without a contract with the city to rent it for the next 20, 30 years.
Well, they all do one particular thing. They give the city and a sense of identity.
Gives us residents a sense of identity, and gives the residents a sense of this community cares about its fabric and its history. And that's the message it sends. That's why it is so critically important. That's why I bought a dilapidated old house that was built in the 1830s to 1840s. We're not sure which. It was called the Richard Plantation, and it was sold to me as a tear-down house. When I saw it, my wife saw it, we said, this is crazy. And we spent the next 4 years and the rest of our life savings restoring it. Now it's one of the most beautiful homes of Jacksonville, on the river, up on a hill, overlooking downtown. It's just a gorgeous property that anytime and every time someone comes to that house, they are just blown away and just so joyful to see it and to feel it and to talk about it. They want to go into the cellar and they want to look at the hand-hewed beams. They want to, they just love it. They want to look at the rippled glass windows that we still have in the structure. They want to look at the beautiful old kind of barn-like looking sculptured doors that we saved and reused throughout the house. It just brings me great pride and joy, and it's a wonderful resource for our city.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough on behalf of the Society for what you've done for the historic structures. And
I'd like to do more, Jerry. I've actually had most of the buildings we talked about under contract at one time or another, but we're just not been able to make the numbers work yet, but we will.
Folks, thank you for your interest. I'd appreciate it if you check our Jacksonville Historical website at jaxhistory.com for more details on this list, our various programs, and all the other things we do here in town. So until next time, we're history. Come see us again. Thank you.